Well, good evening, everyone. Hope and pray that you're well. Recording now the message that will be shared at Laidley and Hatton Vale Uniting Churches tomorrow. We're looking at Exodus 3 and 4, particularly looking at the topic of the reluctant prophet. I'll read from Exodus 3 and 4 for us. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see the strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of the land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Moses said to God, Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, The God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, What is his name? Then what shall I say to them? God said to them, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, Say to the Israelites, The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name you shall call me from generation to generation. Go, assemble the elders of Israel, and say to them, The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, appeared to me and said, I have watched over you and have seen what has been done to you in Egypt. And I have promised to bring you up out of your misery in Egypt, into the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. The elders of Israel will listen to you. Then you and the elders are to go to the king of Egypt and say to him, The Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless a mighty hand compels him. So I'll stretch out my hand and strike the Egyptians with all the wonders that I will perform among them. After that, he will let you go. And I will make the Egyptians favorably disposed towards this people, so that when you leave, you will not go empty-handed. Every woman is to ask her neighbor, and any woman living in her house, for articles of silver and gold, and for clothing, which you will put on your sons and daughters. So you will plunder the Egyptians. Moses answered, What if they do not believe me or listen to me and say that the Lord did not appear to you? Then the Lord said to him, What is that in your hand? A staff, he replied. The Lord said, Throw it on the ground. Moses threw it on the ground, and it became a snake. And he ran from it. Then the Lord said to him, Reach out your hand and take it by the tail. So Moses reached out and took hold of the snake, and it turned back into the staff in his hand. This, said the Lord, is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. Then the Lord said, Put your hand inside your cloak. So Moses put his hand into his cloak, and when he took it out, the skin was leprous. It had become as white as snow. Now put it back into your cloak, he said. So Moses put his hand back into his cloak, and when he took it out, it was restored, like the rest of his flesh. Then the Lord said, if they do not believe you or pay attention to the first sign, then they may believe the second. But if they do not believe these two signs, or listen to you, take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground. The water you take from the river, will become blood on the ground. Moses said to the Lord, pardon your servant. Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither in the past, nor have since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. The Lord said to him, who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will help you speak and will teach you what to say. But Moses said, pardon your servant. Lord, please send someone else. Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses, and he said, what about your brother Aaron the Levite? I know he can speak well. He is already on his way to meet you, and he will be glad to see you. You shall speak to him and put words in his mouth. I will help both of you to speak and will teach you what to do. He will speak to the people for you, and it will be as if he were your mouth, and as if you were God to him. But take the staff in your hand so you can perform the signs with it. This is the word of the Lord. Identity is one of the hottest topics in modern media and society. Whether it's celebrities, children's animated films, TED Talks, self-help gurus, or programs run at many schools, there seems to be an overarching narrative, to the point of being a mantra, that we are who we determine ourselves to be. We not only choose our own adventure, but we also choose our own character. No matter our physical sex, our race, even our age, everything is up for grabs for us to define as we choose. The challenge, though, is that reality can pour cold water on the self-identity of people when there is a clash between the person's self-identity and what reality actually is. It is interesting that although there are many in society who completely endorse people's right to and freedom to self-identify however they want, and would also say that others are wrong should they ever question this, it is also true that many in society delight in seeing people's delusions come crashing down when confronted with reality. If you think I'm mistaken, consider the popularity of TV talent shows. People enjoy watching the rehearsal stage of these talent shows, where we see some contestants who believe that they can self-define their talents and abilities, normally as being amazing or one in a million. Often to the delight of the audience, the contestants can be shocked and even horrified when talent judges don't share the contestants' estimation of their talents and abilities. Why is it that as a society we can recognize the importance of self-identity conforming with reality with something as vacuous and short-lived as a talent show, and yet fail to see the importance of self-identity and reality being congruous in areas that are likely to have a much greater bearing on a person's life and well-being? This morning we're going to have a look at a section of Exodus which deals with the issue of identity. We'll see whether it is our self-identity which is a defining factor in what we may do or what we may achieve. Now, the reading opened on Moses doing the job that he had been doing for decades. Moses is now a shepherd of his father-in-law Jethro's flock. Moses may have previously thought that he would be a liberator and rescuer of his people, the Israelites, from their slavery in Egypt. But now he has become a shepherd. For Moses, it would have been easy for him to regard his work as a shepherd as a mark of failure. Moses was in Midian because he had killed a man before he could do anything of significance to rescue the Israelites. However, in God's providence, Moses had spent the decades learning how to shepherd and lead a group of animals in preparation for becoming a shepherd of God's people to lead them out of slavery. God is able to use the circumstances of our lives, even our failures, to shape and prepare us for being used by Him. This is why we must always be extraordinarily careful with the common belief today of avoiding things you find uncomfortable. No, I'm not endorsing pig-headedly sticking at something where or somewhere where you're being mistreated or where you're being crushed, unless the Lord specifically told you to stay in such circumstances. But we should be able to see that God can and does use uncomfortable and unpleasant experiences to shape us. One of the people I worked with at the University of Queensland found it incredibly frustrating that there was significant pressure on universities to avoid students being made to feel uncomfortable in what they were exposed to on campus or even in their courses. What this had led to was the cancellation of various speakers and events which would raise topics that were unpleasant or uncomfortable for certain students, and even to the excusing of students from certain parts of courses if the material was too confronting. My colleague would often respond to this by saying, but universities are supposed to be dangerous places. Universities are dangerous places because the ideas are dangerous. Ideas are dangerous to our prejudices, to the prevailing culture, and to unexamined beliefs. If the cost of being exposed to new ideas and the truth makes us uncomfortable, then surely that is a price we should be willing to pay to grow and learn. Turning back to Moses, we see that Moses has a low self-image through this section of Exodus. To start with, when God called out to Moses to use him to rescue the Israelites, Moses responded with, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" Moses starts by declaring his unworthiness, but when God continues to call Moses, he then asks, "Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' Then what shall I tell them?" Moses is now declaring that he is unsuitable to be sent because he wouldn't know what to say to the Israelites. And then goes on to say that even if he provided the Israelites with the name that God had given him to tell the Israelites won't believe him. Moses answered, "What if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, 'The Lord did not appear to you'?" As Moses continues to get nowhere in trying to convince God that the Israelites won't listen to him, he returns to his own inadequacy, focusing on speech. Moses said to the Lord, "Pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past, nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue." The words translated slow of speech are literally heavy of mouth, and so some wonder how this compares with Stephen's speech in Acts 7, which says of Moses, "Moses was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was powerful in speech and action." Well, heavy of mouth may indicate a stutter. It may indicate that Moses was not eloquent in speech, so he used more street language than polite language of the court. Or it may be that he simply was slow to speak. He would speak slowly, and maybe he had to think about his words a lot. He was slower than others. Well, the simplest answer is that Moses could have had any of these struggles, and while they may have made Moses very self-conscious about going before Pharaoh, Moses could still speak with power. For myself, I had a teacher at school who had a terrible stutter at times, but he was an amazing teacher. I loved that man, and spoke with real power. Moses has such a low self-view that he concludes his argument by simply saying, "Pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else." So here is Moses' self-assessment and self-identity. Moses is now a shepherd who appears to be deeply impacted by his past failures and thus unworthy of being given a great task by God. Moses not only sees himself as unworthy of being chosen by God, but he also expects that he will be rejected by the Israelites. Finally, Moses holds that he is not up to the task of speaking before the Egyptian rulers to demand the release of the Israelites. How then is Moses to be answered? Well, if he was in Australia, he may simply be told, "Sure, you're right, mate." Alternatively, for many pop psychologists and people on social media, Moses should be assured that he's awesome, that he can do this and can smash his life goals. "Moses, you should believe in yourself. Any failures in the past are just that. They're in the past, and so just focus on what's ahead. Strive to be the best you can be. Come on." All this, however, is not the way Moses is answered by God. God addresses Moses' identity issues by drawing Moses to look not to himself, but to God, and to consider himself, that is Moses, in the light of his call from Yahweh. And it is to this that we now turn. So looking at this section again, we see that it is God who takes the initiative. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames and of fire from within the bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Now it is God in the form of the angel of the Lord who appears to Moses and gets his attention by appearing as a bush that is not consumed by fire. Now, some people want to give great attention to what this bush may have been and how this actually happened, but that's really unnecessary. What's important is that this bush prompts Moses to investigate, and what is truly significant is the conversation which follows. A conversation which starts by God taking the lead and calling out to Moses. In terms of identity, it is not overtly stated in this text, but the significance of the bush not being consumed is that God is self-sustaining. God doesn't require anyone or anything, and this reflects back on God's identity. God is not calling out to Moses because God lacks something in himself. More clearly recognized in the story is that God takes the initiative. It is God who appears to Moses, and it is God who calls out to Moses when Moses comes over to investigate. So God takes the initiative. God is self-sustaining, not needing anyone else. God taking the initiative doesn't only sorry, I lost my spot. God taking the initiative doesn't only happen when with Moses, but we see it all through the scriptures and in the lives of Christians. We are those who respond to God working for and in us. Now, God next identifies himself to Moses as both separate from Moses, but also connected to him. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. God describes himself as holy. The word holy carries with it the idea of being apart and distinct, but it also includes a moral aspect, that God is pure. And it's probably due to the sinless or the pure aspect of holiness that Moses hides his face. Like Isaiah, who said, Woe to me, I am a man of unclean lips. Or Peter, who said to Jesus, Depart from me, Lord, for I am a sinner. Moses is aware of his own failings. God, however, not only defines himself as distinct from Moses, but also identifies himself as connected to Moses, as he is the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And this leads naturally to God revealing himself by describing what he will do for his people, for Moses' people. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the land of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. The home of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now the cry of Israel has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. God identifies himself as the one who cares for people in distress and under oppression. Also, God's identity is the one who is the rescuer. Now, God may use Moses, but it is God who will do the rescuing. This is connected to that idea of God being self-sufficient. He doesn't need Moses, but he chooses to use Moses. In all this, God's identity is he who keeps his promises, recognizing the connection between what God will do for his people and what he had previously promised their forefathers, particularly Abraham. So we have all this self-revelation, this self-identifying by God before we get to Moses' first objection. It is God who takes the initiative. It is God who is holy. It is God who is the God of Moses and his people, a people to whom he had made promises. And it is God who is the one who will keep his promises and rescue and is the rescuer of his people. It is extremely important that we see this, because just as our self-identity should line up with reality, as I mentioned at the start, so our self-identity also has to factor in the reality of God and what God has said to and about us. This doesn't mean that Moses was wrong to raise his initial objection, but understanding God and the call of God, understanding the call of God should shape the way Moses views himself. Now, as I mentioned, the self-help gurus of our age would be telling Moses telling Moses when he had concerns, "Come on, Moses, you've got this. I believe in you." We're told to trust in ourselves, to believe in ourselves, and to shape our own story. However, when Moses raises his objection when Moses raises his objections, did God tell Moses to believe in himself? But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" And God said, "I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain." Moses said to God, "Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you.' And they ask me, 'What is his name?' What shall I say to them?" God said to Moses, "I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you." Moses isn't told to believe in himself, but to believe in the God who is sending him, who will accompany him, and who will accomplish what he says he will do. It's quite interesting that when Moses asks for proof that God has chosen him, he's told, "Here's the proof. You'll know it because it's going to happen." The future certainly is also tied up with the name that God declares to Moses that he is to be known as. The name Yahweh, normally translated in our Bibles as the Lord, all in capitals, is normally explained in our it's normally explained in our English Bibles as "I am who I am," which has the weight of meaning I am the one who exists, who always has and always will be, and who needs no other. Needless to say, "I am who I am" is less of a mouthful. However, if you look at the notes in your Bibles, you may see a little letter or a number at this point in the Bible, and it says that another translation of "I am who I am" is "I will be who I will be." Now, if that's the focus of the translation, the emphasis moves to the future. And although Yahweh is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to this generation of Israelites, to whom Moses is sent, Yahweh will be known for what he is going to do for them. Perhaps it's not surprising that we start hearing titles or describers of Yahweh, such as in Genesis 6, verse 12. "Be careful that you do not forget the Lord who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery." Yahweh will be who he will be, and what that is the one who will rescue them from slavery. Now, Moses wasn't to believe in himself, but to believe in the God who had chosen him, and who had the power and the faithfulness to bring to pass what he promised. When Moses still had concerns, Yahweh gave him 3 signs for him to display: a staff turning into a snake, a leprous hand, and water from the Nile turning to blood. God is assuring Moses that he will provide Moses with everything needed for the task which is given to him. And so it's not surprising that we pick up a note of frustration in God's tone when Moses continues to raise objections. A tone which turns to anger when Moses demonstrates willful rejection of God's will, and thus a lack of faith. Moses said to the Lord, "Pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue." The Lord said to him, "Who gave human beings their mouth? Who made them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will make you speak and will teach you what to say." But Moses said, "Pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else." Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses, and he said, "What about your brother Aaron, the Levite? I know he can speak well. He is already on his way to meet you, and he will be glad to see you. You shall speak to him and put your words in his mouth. I will help both of you speak and will teach you what to do." Now, God is clearly not caught off guard by Moses' repeated objections because in his sovereignty, in God's sovereignty, Moses' brother Aaron is already on the way to meet Moses. He's probably on the way to meet Moses to tell him that the old Pharaoh is dead and so he can safely return to Egypt. However, while not surprising, God is angered because it is completely unacceptable for Moses to reject God's choice despite all the ways in which God has made himself known, identified himself to Moses, and has shown that he will provide all that is required. Even here we learn more of God's identity. God is patient, but God is also the one who demands faith and obedience. Now, in conclusion, Moses is a unique character and he has a unique role in God's plans for his people. And as such, we shouldn't have to be careful about too quickly drawing applications from Moses' life and experiences with Yahweh and applying them directly to us. Having said that, some general principles might include it's important that we have an identity of ourselves that is grounded in reality. However, even more important than having an accurate self-identity, we need to have an accurate understanding of God. It is being known by God which has the ultimate impact on who we are and what we can do. The fullest revelation of God is in Christ, where we see that Yahweh continues to be the one who keeps his promises and who is the savior of his people from slavery, even the slavery of sin. So I encourage you, listen to the voice of God. We find that clearly in Jesus. We find it clearly written in the scriptures. Listen to the voice of God. Pay attention to how God identifies himself and what that identity means for us when God calls us and wants to use us. Thank you for joining me this evening, and may God bless you.